Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Darshan Talks. I'm your host, Darshan Kulkarni. It's my mission to help patients trust the products they depend on. I'm an attorney, I'm a pharmacist, and I advise companies with FDA-regulated products. So if you have an interest in an FDA-regulated company or its products, this is the podcast for you. What I should point out is that today's podcast is actually really, really interesting. We've had numerous conversations so far, and each time we wished that we had recorded it because each of them has been fascinating. So if you are in marketing, if you're in advertising, if you are even in medical affairs and you're just into communications, this is a podcast you care about because you want to learn how to communicate with patients. You want to learn how to communicate with healthcare practitioners. You want to communicate with caregivers and so many more people. If you like this podcast, please leave a comment, please subscribe. You can find me at Darshan Talks on Twitter or go to our website at darshantalks.com. But today's guest is really, really interesting, really, really exciting. She is the president of CMI Media Group. There was so much more I could say about her, but she has specifically told me not to go down that path. So I'm going to respect that, but she is incredibly fascinating. Our guest today, ladies and gentlemen, is Susan Dorfman. Susan, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, Darshan, thank you so much for having me. You're going to give me a giant head.
Well, you deserve every bit of it. So Susan, I want to talk a little bit more about your role at CMI Media Group. I know I'm required to say all three of those pieces. So you're the president. What does that actually mean now, from the day-to-day functioning perspective?
Oh gosh, so the heavy burden of everything that we do, all of our failures, all of our successes, all of our teams and customers' happiness pretty much sits on my shoulders. So I am that one head responsible for everyone's successes and ultimately all the things that could potentially go wrong.
Okay, so you're responsible. So that means that you're every day in the job of basically saying, I need you to achieve this goal, and I need you to do this. And it's been a very, very busy year and a half. And I understand that you have actually taken the moment to actually go into thanking people, which is unusual because a lot of companies have been trying to do, quote unquote, more with less. And that more with less has always led to dissatisfaction. So how are you thanking people, improving morale, and hopefully addressing the question I saw, I think in today's Forbes, which said that there is a impending avalanche of employees who are getting ready to leave?
Sure. So I think first and foremost, when you're in the people business, which is the business that we're in, your most important, your most coveted asset are the people that work for you. They either make or break your organization. And we are lucky as an executive leadership team to have remarkable talent, dedicated, remarkable talent at our agency. We also have an extremely, extremely fantastic people team who are the champions and supporters of every single person that we employ. One of our key traits as an organization is to be a family. And while it's super important for us to look at culture as an organization and look at people as an organization and to think about cultural fit, we also want to make sure that we are very proactively thinking about cultural ad. And as part of that cultural fit, cultural ad, we are family, people, team mentality. The last year and plus have been incredibly challenging for everyone. Not just our organization, but everyone, every single person, I think, that's trying to cope with being a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, a friend, a family member, a supporter, a champion, an employee, and everything else. It's hard, right? You have no commute, you have no life, you have everything kind of happens within the confines of where you are, some in bigger places, some in smaller places, some with roommates, some with children, cats, dogs, individuals alone. And for our team, they're working really hard. They're serving our clients. They're making sure they don't miss a beat, both in the U.S. as well as outside of the U.S. And that takes a lot to celebrate.
Yeah.
that we've been doing this for a year. So we, as a leadership team, myself personally, have made it a clear and intent purpose for us, especially over the last couple months, to come up with additional ways. So more than the mental health days, more than the bonuses and the RTOs and the dinner gift cards that we'll send out for our entire organization to, hey, don't cook today, go and order dinner for you and your family kind of things. And those are the things around celebrating, rewarding, and also assisting our organization, our people, in the things that they do, right? To try to eliminate some of the heavy lifting where we can, trying to think of ways that we can augment and support them with some of the things that they're doing. Hiring more people. That is a shameless plug, by the way, if anybody is looking for a position. At all levels of the organization. From a celebration and reward perspective, trying to think of ways, what can we do for the people, from, reviews, salaries, all of those kinds of things, to bonuses, to just picking up the phone or doing one of these sessions to just say, hey, how are you? Thank you. Just thank you for all you do. What can we do for you? How's work? And we're doing similar things with our clients as well. So checking in with them, making sure that they're okay, making sure that both our people as well as those that we serve and they serve, that they know that we are, we care, we listen, and we want to hear.
So it's interesting you say that. You say that you talk about the many ways you're helping, many of which are the traditional forms, many of which are saying hello and saying thank you. I'm just thinking visually for me. I get an email from my president saying, I want to talk to you. I don't know what it's about. I would be quaking in my boots. How do you even address that concept that no, this is okay. I'm not complaining. You're not about to be fired.
So that could happen, especially for those who don't know you. Luckily, the organization, the agency, they know me. They know our leadership team. So we try to be very visual. We try to be in front of them all the time. So they know our style, they know our nature. But with that said, absolutely, if I was to get an email, I would be like, oh my God, what did I do? What happened? So right. I think it's all about a communication style. So we don't just do it one time. If you're requesting time with somebody just to check in, let them know, hey, love to just check in. By the way, wanted to say thank you for all you do. Hey, can we get together for one-to-one? I have so many one-to-ones on my calendar for not just my direct reports, but their direct reports and their direct reports and their direct reports. Sometimes it's just to check in. Hey, want to know how you're doing. I know you just completed this massive project or this massive program. Want to hear how it went. We use so many different forms of conversation and communication, from instant messages to text messages, even Facebook. So I'm connected probably to half of my team on Facebook. So they know my life. They know everything about my son, my family, and so on.
So you're talking about, like you said, you're actually creating that family, and you're creating that atmosphere where people are comfortable coming to you going, I'm struggling with something and I just need help, and having that creation. But I guess this works. It's difficult enough at your level where it's a CMI media group and you're actually going, I need to reach out to multiple layers within. But if I was trying to do this at a pharma company, 10,000 people, 15,000 people, more, how would you recommend they start thinking about thanking their people?
It's in a similar way. So it's not any less or any different than I am. It's a matter of checking in, of being present, whether it's with a department. So we often do it with a department, whether it's through your direct report. So oftentimes I ask some of my team members to say thanks. We have monthly bell ringers where teams celebrate other teams as well. People celebrate people. We talk about other successes. We let different team members. So it's not just executives that are running the bell ringers. It's different faces that are out there. There's so many ways to say thank you. the only thing that you need to do is find the time to do that. And that's sometimes the hardest thing to do. And when you find the time, you'll be amazed at how many ways you can say, hey, I appreciate you, to a immense number of people.
So now you're in the business of saying thank you. You've started doing that for your employees. You started doing that for your vendors, and you started doing that for your customers. Now here's the question I have. The next step that we are all trying to say thank you to is to our patients. And how do you connect with patients? Are patients the same as they have been in terms of connecting, in terms of communicating? And how have styles changed in the recent past over the last with COVID? And is it likely to continue?
So, that's a $1 million question. And when you kind of look at the archetypes of people overall, right, and how people think, how people act, especially when it comes to health, because that is one thing, unlike consumerism, where we're trying to get to the new place, right? We're getting that new car or that new refrigerator, or going to the supermarket or restaurant to buy, some good food and enjoy ourselves. Health is very different. So there is proactivity in health and trying to maintain our health, and that's through exercise, eating right. But then there's sick care. And oftentimes when we talk about healthcare, we actually talk about sick care. And sick care is actually getting not to necessarily a better place from where you started. It's trying to get back to where you started from, if you're lucky enough to get to that place. Yeah. So as we think about different types of people overall, right? If we think about our families and that small circle that we have, we're going to find very different types of people. And it's really important to think through that, and think through that in the way that we shouldn't look at all patients as the new digital patient. COVID was a great example of that, especially in the rollout with seniors. We saw how the digital divide actually stood in conflict with helping seniors get to the vaccines that they needed. So being able to understand the people that you're actually trying to reach, and I like to use this as an example of personalization versus humanization, right? In some ways, personalization is treating people like you know who they are, and personalization is actually treating people, or humanization, I should say, like treating people like you know who they are matters, and that matters is the most important thing. And when you know that people are likely going to be different in the way that they themselves consider health, are proactive towards it or not, can demonstrate that thank you, or hey, you matter, no matter what you are like, right? So you may have the proactive, you may have the reactive, you may have those who are likely to stay on therapy. My husband is one of those people. If you tell him this is the regimen, he will follow it to a T. I'm the complete opposite. So being able to adjust and really make sure that different personalities, whether it's me or someone like him, that regardless of who we are in the way that we approach our healthcare, that, hey, we matter to you. And this is especially true in some of the more vulnerable communities as we think about diversity and inclusion and equity. It's not to forget those people. And again, don't just make it an afterthought when you're talking to a broader community. Make that a key part of your communication strategy. Make the thank you, and I love that you put that in my head, the thank you in every part of every touch point of every message of every communication that you can have with a patient. That just gave me chills to think about. Thank you for putting that in my head.
Happy to. So you're talking about saying thank you, and you're saying that in every communication, connect with the patient and say thank you for being you. But here's my question. Yeah. If you are doing this, and you're doing this in every communication, how do you avoid it coming across as almost false and fake?
Yeah, so you generally wouldn't say thank you in your communication. That was definitely not the intent. It is a proverbial thank you, by leveraging, I'll call it a call to action, right? Because that's an important part of everything that we do, especially in the alternative communication space when it's non-personal or non-face-to-face, I should say, because it can be very, very personal, is the ability to use that call to action to not only show them, Susan, like I know, or Sue, I know you're a female versus a male, because there are male Sues. Show them also that I matter. Show them, here are the things that I can support you with, right? If it's financial support, if it's, other alternative educational support, if it's patient reminders, it is those types of things, right? That call to action, the things that basically tell me that, hey, I matter to you. And when we think about our own personal experiences with companies, those that make us feel like we matter are the ones that we tend to, for the long haul, tend to stick with.
It's beautiful. The idea that if a company makes me feel like I matter, I will want to be with them because I know that they see me. It's interesting you say that, because we could do a lot more digging into this concept, but I'm aware of time and I'm kind of aware of all these fun things I can get into. But the part that really sticks out to me is this idea that we talk about providing the support, but there has been a lot of pushback from companies who have created patient support organizations and done it the wrong way. And how do you? And part of that is sort of going and having their proposed marketing and their communications reviewed by the medical, legal, regulatory teams. The problem is that if they do it right, the medical, legal, regulatory team almost acts as a barrier to good communication support. On the other hand, they have I serve on a medical, legal, regulatory teams, and you're trying to do the right job. You're trying to protect patients, but you can also end up doing it in a way that isn't helpful. So what are some ideas you have on making that process better?
Yeah, Darshan, I have to say that I've been very, very blessed, I think, to work with many companies where the medical, regulatory, and legal team is like the I don't want to put this in a negative way, but they're not an afterthought. That's okay to say that. They are part of the team as we're starting to innovate and think about the ideas. Often what happens is there's a bunch of agencies with the client partner that come together, they dream up all of these brilliant, and they really are, they're brilliant, innovative ideas. And then they go, they produce content, they go to MLR, and MLR basically says, well, this can't be done, and that can't be done, and that can't be done. And then you're back to the drawing board. And the biggest challenge is not the fact that you're back to the drawing board, is the fact that you have now invested so much time and have to go back and reinvest more time. So you are not getting what is absolutely necessary to the patient. So what I've seen through some of the better practices that I have been part of is having that MLR team as part of that innovation process, having them think through the how-to as opposed to the why not, right? So one company that I used to work with in Germany had this idea of the purple room, and they would invite all the different stakeholders to the purple room, and that's where all ideas were made possible. So that room was called the power of possible thinking. There was no such thing as it can't be done, and you don't walk out until you kind of come up with the power of possible, which was absolutely brilliant. It got people to think about how we can. And I think if you always put the patient in the center and think about, is this right for the patient? What are we doing for the patient, right? How can it help them? Not necessarily how can it help us, but what is in it for them? I think at the end of the day, that is your driving force. And one thing I would love to see, which we've already seen in the FDA, I would love to see a patient or patient groups being part of that innovation session and being part of that MLR brand agency team to be able to get their perspectives around the whys. Because when you hear their stories, when you listen to them, it makes everything worthwhile.
It's funny you say that. There's as you know, and I discovered this about you about 20 minutes ago when you told me that your husband is in the actual patient recruitment world, which I think is fascinating by itself. But it's one of those key components that the FDA is actually a big advocate of, where they're saying we want patients to be part of the studies. We want patients to actually decide how the protocol is actually designed. So patient advocacy and patient engagement is a core component now, and there are several laws that support this, of patients being part of the process. I haven't seen as much conversation about patients being part of the process after approval. And what I hear you saying is there's a definite need, because in the end, in many ways, patients are the only people who can communicate with other patients. We can do a good job of helping, but I think in the end, a patient's voice resonates in a way that other voices cannot.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do have patient voices, absolutely, through ad boards. And what I'm talking about is before the ad boards, right? So as we're thinking, as we're dreaming, as we're building, and in much greater form than market research says, right? I did a survey. Here is what qual and quant studies have told us. But hey, let's embrace this group of patient influencers, of patients. Sometimes it's actually influencers, those with a voice. And I'm actually really, really interested in how to create a voice for the voiceless. For me, that is, if we can figure that out with pharma and give them a voice and give them representation, whoever they are, I think that will be a huge step in moving in the right direction from a marketing communication point of view.
We definitely need to keep talking, because I have some ideas there for sure. But it's funny you talk about patient influencers, because it's one of those interesting things that's actually come back to bite pharma. But a really good example of that is actually in the tobacco, and specifically in the vaping market, where the vaping industry used influencers in an inappropriate way, in that they were using it with kids. So when you are choosing and guiding and making recommendations for an organization, how do you create that ethical framework to go, look, here's how we're going to engage, how we're going to decide which company we're going to go after, and or the types of promotional messages we're comfortable putting out?
So I think that's a whole conversation that's probably a few hours long, Darshan. I do want to share a thought around, we were talking about the new patient, or the evolved patient, right? So those, now that we have so much access. When I was growing up, the only access I had was to my parents' friends, and the library. I think that was really it. When you think about what the internet had done for us, and they were my influencers at the time, and certainly up until a certain age when the internet started to be what it is. And with the rise of the internet, what was happening was that my sphere of influence became broader. And at first it extended to maybe people like me in different groups that I was aligned to. Now I'm old, so this is going back years. And then, right. And then it became broader and broader, right? So my community, my sphere of influence became much bigger. So when we talk about influence, this is not necessarily paid influence. There's influence all around us. There's influence that we can't control. There's influence, which today is much greater than the physician alone, or the pharmacist, or I would say the healthcare professional, or our family. There's community. Yeah. And community is an incredible influence opportunity. And of course, in healthcare, we have to make sure that whatever those influence factors are, that they are also educated to be able to provide the right information. Because oftentimes we get influenced by people that have goodwill, good intent, but often bad information. So That's a key piece. That is even more important than some of the paid things and programs that we are considering. And that is, that is a major fight for accurate information, for the reduction of, I'll call it, fake news in healthcare.
It's funny you talk about that, because one of the things we briefly touched on before we got on to this conversation is the new modes and the new models that you've been thinking about in terms of how are we going to communicate and provide the right information to patients in the right format that they're willing to receive it now in. And again, you didn't say this in the context of that conversation, but you also talked about in the context of the field force. Do you see a future where the field force is actually communicating with patients?
Probably not the field force per se, but there's no reason why MSLs, medical science liaisons, who are healthcare professionals, pharmacists, or medical information group, right, that is staffed to provide a certain level of knowledge and expertise, couldn't be, in the same way that they respond to physicians, couldn't be a source of information vetting. So there are definitely immense opportunities to right the wrongs of bad information that's out there. I also feel like, in addition to healthcare professionals, who are incredibly important and trusted resources by many, not all, but it is by many, there are other incredible and important resources that are trusted in the community that we need to look at more from I'll call it a person-to-person, a B2B person-to-person type of opportunity. And it depends, right, on many cultural factors in terms of where the trust sits, whether it's with, whether it's in church, right, by, certain people, whether it's, my father was a barber, whether it's at the barber shop. God knows how many people trusted him and came to his funeral because of that trust and his influence on their lives. So you really have to know kind of the community, where the trust factors sit. And especially now, especially as we're dealing with COVID and trying to get more people vaccinated and back to the world, looking outside of what we know into some of those other dimensions of trust and communication and sphere of influence becomes so important to what we do. And for the field force, I think I would love to, you shared with me that I'd be able to ask a question of the audience.
Yes.
There's huge internal conversation, and I want to say debate, because it's a really interesting conversation that we're having on the future of field force. What will that look like? Will it be, a kind of a digital rep who can use both face-to-face as well as alternative channels of personalizing and reaching out to their key stakeholders? What does that look like? What does that look like worldwide, not just in the US?
What does the future field force rep look like? I love that. I know we're sort of butting up against time a little bit, but let me sort of do a quick summary of what I think we've discussed, and please correct me if I miss anything. We landed up starting to talk about just creating a culture of, for lack of a better term, thank you. You talked about having the people team. We talked about how you make sure that people who join your team and you are recruiting are part of the cultural ad, if you will. You talked about the different methods you've used, everything from bonuses to RTO to mental health days to dinner gift cards to hiring more people to salaries and bonuses to actually reaching out and talking to them. I think you then spoke a little bit about how we are in the business of sick care and getting and going back to actually where we started, and we talked about this digital divide, this idea of diverse patients and reaching them where they are. We talked about the difference between personalization, which is I know you, to humanization, which is I know who you are, and that matters. and the idea of having a call to action in this diversity, inclusion, equity framework, if you will. You talked about educational support. You talked about patient reminders. You talked about financial support and what that can do in terms of providing access and in terms of helping educate people. We talked about some of the challenges around getting the message across, and that was through MLRs and changing the mindset from how to why not. And you talked about what I think is a great metaphor, which is the purple room. You actually physically did the purple room, but I love it as a metaphor. And if I had a hashtag, I think that would be the hashtag for today, the purple room. The power of possible. How do you actually help the patient? You talked about the value of patient stories and patient influencers, and you talked about how the future might actually include MSLs as part of the field force. Did I miss anything?
No, you did great. Wow. I didn't even realize we talked about all those things.
It was such a great conversation. I do have to ask you, we always do a rapid fire question. There are going to be only 2. Would you be open to answering them?
Sure.
Okay. So the first question, what challenges you?
What challenges me? I think what challenges me most is to create an environment that people will want to come to every single day. So when I wake up in the morning, I'm like a kid in a candy store, especially when they give me like little projects and data stuff that I can do, because I'm a data geek and a marketer at heart. So when my team allows me to do some of those things, even on weekends, I get so excited. But I think that challenges me, is how to be the best me for them, for the people that work for us, for our clients, how to provide the best of, how to empower, how to embrace, how to make everyone heard and feel like they are wanted, celebrated, rewarded, and appreciated.
Okay. And what is the best part of your job?
The best part of my job is seeing people who get promotions, seeing people who grow. And I have to tell you, even though I please clients discourage this, watching some of our team members go and work for pharma companies and get promotions and become super big shots in those companies, and just knowing that we started together, and knowing that they're family. Hey, look, I mean, they're succeeding. I don't think there's a greater joy for me personally than to watch their successes.
That is so awesome. I should clarify, just because I'm a lawyer, nothing in this podcast should be construed as legal or clinical advice of any kind. It's intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. For those of you who missed it, Susan, how can they actually reach you?
S. Dorfman at cmimediagroup.com is probably the best way. I'm the quickest responder to email. Also LinkedIn. Yeah, LinkedIn.
Perfect. And again, if you like the podcast, please leave a comment. Please subscribe. You can find me on Twitter at Darshan Talks, or just go to our website at darshantalks.com. Susan, thank you so much for coming on. It was wonderful to have you.
My pleasure.